Hello, my name is Stacy Smakovsky, and I'll be discussing the horror genre in LDS living and literature. It might surprise you to know that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is one of the most widely sold and celebrated novels of all time. It is also the most analyzed and critically acclaimed. It is also a horror novel. Shelley was the daughter of philosopher and activist Mary Wollstonecraft, and it is believed that Shelley, who is deemed the mother of all Gothic horror, was extremely influenced by her own mother, who died shortly after her birth. Wollstonecraft wrote, "No man chooses evil because it is evil. He only mistakes it for happiness, the good he seeks." The complexity of that statement is a widespread theme through the most famous of horror novels. Within the LDS community, it is widely held belief that we should work to eliminate evil in our lives. Unfortunately, some believe that in order to do that, we must turn our backs to it and pretend it doesn't exist. The misconception that is found in that logic is that without understanding evil, you are doomed to not recognize the enemy when you face it. In 1973, the Ensign published an article titled "Creative Writing in the Church, a Challenge to Young Writers." In it, Bruce B. Clark stated, quote, "Hypocrisy, bigotry, sentimentality, pomposity, apathy, wherever such attitudes are found, they should be exposed. It is not only a writer's privilege, but also his duty to expose them, and you can't expose evil or solve problems by turning your back on them or pretending they don't exist," unquote. One of my dear friends and mentors is an LDS horror writer named Michael Brent Collings. He is an international bestseller and has written numerous terrifying books. He often teaches and speaks about writing and the horror genre. He believes that his position on horror and his writings don't conflict with his faith. Collings often uses the story of Christ in his lectures as a way to explain that horror is an acceptable medium of expressing lessons of hope and redemption. He says, quote, "The most horrific tale ever told is in the New Testament," unquote. We repeatedly read those verses in the Bible in order to learn and understand the tremendous suffering of Christ, in order to help us fully comprehend the gift that is grace. Collings conveys that the literary arts paint evil so that the audience can understand what motivates characters. Prominent LDS composer K. Newell Daly says, quote, "The arts enable us to communicate important realities that can be shared in no other way," unquote. He goes on to quote Boyd K. Packer and says, quote, "Because of what artists do, we are able to feel and learn very quickly some spiritual things that we would otherwise learn very slowly," unquote. That feeling that Elder Packer talks about is empathy. Literature is a wonderful tool for teaching and feeling empathy for others. Orson Scott Card is another famous author, well known for his science fiction novel Ender's Game. He spoke at BYU in 1980 on this very topic. He says, quote, "The characters become the surrogate of the audience. The artist shapes the audience experience. It is never entirely the experience that the writer created. It is always the experience of the creator or the character combined with the experience of the audience member," unquote. This is an important consideration when it comes to works of horror, because what is horrific or vile to one reader may actually be meaningful to another. This is sometimes difficult, specifically for LDS people, to understand due to this perception that the culture of the religion, that everyone believes the same thing and that their faith is universally similar. However, with fast-growing diversity, it is becoming more apparent that there are perceptual differences that don't conflict with faith. Generally, it is important just to understand the principle of discerning between good and evil. In the Book of Mormon, it states, quote, "Wherefore take heed that ye judge not that which is of the devil to be of God, or that which is good or of God to be of the devil," unquote. That's found in Moroni 7:14. In a 2015 Brigham Young speech, Larry Wilson gave a talk about the portrayal of evil in fiction, and he spoke about two highly regarded and admired tales, the Chronicles of Narnia and the Lord of the Rings. He spoke about how the reader can see the purpose of evil depictions in order to overcome it. And he said, quote, "This is a fallen world. The scriptures call Satan the prince of this world. The works of both Lewis and Tolkien contain satanic figures who are sought to cruelly dominate human beings, the White Witch in one case and Sauron in the other. What does mankind need in such a world? We need forces to counter the boundless evil and a hero to lead those forces. One of those attractions, the attractions of Lewis and Tolkien's works, is this theme of our need for such a hero, a savior, if you will. On their own, all the characters in these stories we identify with come to a point in their own failure, unquote. They need someone stronger than they are. All of the members have unique experiences and backgrounds that influence their perception, but overcoming evil is a common goal among all members of the church. While realistic depictions of evil are somewhat unnerving and uncomfortable, well, frankly, they should be, it is not fair for one to disrespect the expression of that or discount it if it is not gratuitous or illicit. The purpose of fiction is to tell a story, often of triumph, and horror is expressly written for that very purpose. When done in an uplifting and purposeful way, horrors that are illustrated on the pages of books can be told in a way to glorify God and our human need for heroes and faith. Real life is hard. Fiction is not necessarily an escape, but it is cathartic. Horror helps us become aware of all the things that we want to change in our world, and most importantly, in ourselves. After all, the horror genre is actually the only one in which theological and pedagogical subjects are reflected on without criticism. For some reason, people of all faith and backgrounds, including critics, are completely comfortable talking about such things openly in the horror genre. It is a genre that teaches empathy and tolerance. It is important to eliminate evil, but that requires an acknowledgement that there is evil to fight. Tolkien's character Samwise Gamgee said it best in The Two Towers. He said, "It is like the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were, and sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. I know now, folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, but they didn't. They kept going because they were holding on to something, that there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for." It is the responsibility of readers and writers alike to depict evil, but not to perpetuate it. The horror genre isn't inherently evil, and while some choose to eliminate it from the libraries because it isn't in their taste, it can and should be regarded as a worthy genre to be included in the literature canon. Thank you. If you have any questions, you're welcome to contact me anytime, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.